The listener gave me a copy of the original Form 1040 from around 1915. 2 years after the dreaded 16th Amendment was passed, fraudulent central bank, in my opinion at least, was formed. Now, back then, the federal government got by with a mere 1% tax on the income of folks who made more than $3,000 or $4,000. Now, that was the amount above $3,000 or $4,000. It was a lot of money in those days. $3,000 or $4,000, you were firmly in super middle class territory. You were making money at the rate of, let's say a city or a county administrator today. All right? Now seriously, translating to about $100,000 to $132,000 today. And back then you would have paid 1% of your income above $100,000 or $132,000 if it were translated to today. None of us would practically be paying. Now, the reason it's $100,000 or $132,000 today, value of the dollar's fallen 97% from that time to today's dollar. And a dollar in 1915 is worth about $33 today. It's incredible. Now that 1% income tax, do you realize that you pay 15 times that original income tax rate today just on Medicare and Social Security taxes alone? 15 times that rate, 15%. No income tax. We're talking about just Social Security and Medicare. So what do you do? So we're, sitting around here, what do we do about it? The current two-party gang, and yes, I'm a member of one of the gangs, and the government gang, which it supports, unfortunately, they'd like you to focus on only one thing. And that's to throw out enough members of the other criminal gang's party so that you can bring in enough members of their criminal gang to restore the republic. We've been playing this game for a lot of years. And it has a lot of appeal because we're thinking, gee, all I got to do is vote. I've done my job. I think we need to be a little more engaged than that. Certainly, you should exercise your right to vote and be very careful about who you vote this year as you remember November, right? Right. Remember November. And I know in my heart that we're going to have some great signs of progress to report as the year goes on. But it's not going to be enough. I want to share with you a thought that may have more lasting value. Can anybody out here answer, where does the authority for our form of government derive? Where does it come from?
Our Creator.
Well, the people to a certain... Yeah, that's right. The consent of the governed. The consent of the governed. That's very important.
That's what your sign says.
Ultimately, all government authority rests on the assumption that you're okay with what it does. It's kind of a master-slave complex, the way it's working out in real life. They want to whip you just enough to keep you cowed, keep you inhibited, keep you dependent on what's being sold, because they tend to sell solutions in order to get votes. Can we agree on this so far? All right. So when I say, start taking away your consent, what do I mean by start taking away your consent? Well, make it obvious that you're no longer consenting. I'm not telling you to go out to the IRS and say, I don't care what your magic paper says about administrative rules, I'm not paying! Or not driving into town and flipping off the cop and driving how fast ever you want. That's not what I'm talking about. Now, believe me, there are certainly people in the Marxist, Leninist opposition that would like to think that's what you're all about.
Sit down.
You just want to be violent, nasty. That's not what we're talking about at all. Now, needless to say, those kind of rebellions, like I mentioned before, taking on the Internal Revenue Service, and they'll certainly get people's attention. And that's certainly showing that you don't consent to be governed, but there are big government boxes and a lot of government employees with guns that are willing to guard you when you try to do those kind of things. That would end badly. I'm talking about nonviolent ways of reclaiming your power and liberty as a free citizen. That's why I think Gandhi, even though I may not have agreed with his type of government, but I thought he was brilliant. He didn't tell the oppressed Indian people to throw out one party, vote the other one in, and then your work is over. He changed the way people thought. He always held the moral high ground. He didn't preach violence, But his words changed the way peoples viewed themselves and what they thought they could accomplish. And when enough people's ways of thinking changed, he won. Ultimately, it's how it worked. Yeah, there was a lot in between there. But that's what I think the Tea Party Patriot movement, folks, is all about. It's not about revolutionary thinking. It's merely changing our thinking so that we remember our country's founding, that we remember the principles it stands for, and that we remember what's right there in front of us. It's in our DNA. All you have to do to change is remember it. So back to the elections. Yeah, that'll have an effect. And let's work really hard on that, okay? Can we all do that? Yeah. All right. But I think we also have to work to withdraw our consent from the abusive forms of government interference and regulation in all ways legally possible. You do this in order to restore personal responsibility and individual liberty, because the two are linked. You can't be free without also being responsible for that freedom. Now, would you agree that today personal responsibility isn't quite as prized as it may have been during our nation's founding? Yeah. This is a cultural failing of ours. And because of a lack of responsibility, government then steps in and provides all that help to those who need it. Unfortunately, that government help invariably leads to more government control. And the more help and control the government gives you, what do you have less of? Freedom. You have less freedom. Less freedom for the individual. So I go back to that withdrawing of consent. Where can you withdraw consent? Reclaim individual liberty and responsibility. I have a few ideas. A lot of folks in Jackson County are doing one of them right now, and that's with education. There are many people that don't like the collectivist anti-morality teachings of the modern-day public school.
Yeah.
Amen. I can see there's some sympathy out there for that. Now, did they attack the school?
No.
No. They withdrew their children. They homeschooled. Or they went to a private school that shared their values. It's very responsible. And it's a way of withdrawing consent. Now, can you imagine if 80% of the parents in Jackson County withdrew their children? How do you think that might affect the government system? Probably a lot smaller, wouldn't it? Or else it would certainly start thinking, boy, maybe we have to respond to what they're wanting out there. Now, right now, one of the biggest arguments we the people have is over health care right now, too. Some people think it's a personal right. I don't think that is. You know, we're going to quibble on this stuff right now. Now, maybe you can take more responsibility for your health. I'm not going to sit around here and preach to you about losing weight and getting healthier. You've heard enough about that before. But anyway, to use the healthcare system less is another way of sort of withdrawing your consent of the national form of healthcare. Okay? Another example of withdrawing your consent are currency. Government loves being able to print up the money in your pocket and silently tax your wealth and tax your savings, keeping you dependent on retirement systems and other entitlement programs. Now, there's a way to remove your consent there too. Some diversify in gold and silver, other commodities that go up in value as the price of your government paper goes down. I'm not giving advice, just another example of ways to reclaim your power and your liberty on a personal level. The more power you have, the less power the government has over you, okay? Another aspect, how many folks depend on the government in bad times, in times of crisis, natural disasters, economic disasters? How can you withdraw some consent there? Store some food and essentials in excess of what you need. Our great-grandparents did. Made sense then. Makes even more sense now, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
Sure. Learn to grow a garden. Learn to be able to provide as much for your family as you can. It's personally satisfying. Teach other people how to do these lost skills. And if there is a problem someday, God forbid, but at least you're not in line for the government cheese. All right? I think that's a good plan.